boils and ghouls, and every soul in between. Welcome to Loco Profiling episode 17. A special Halloween episode, if you will. Tonight, on this most hallowed of eves, we will look at the time that Mr. Henry Fowler, the Chief Mechanical Engineer of the London, Midland and Scottish Railway, had unleashed his inner Dr. Frankenstein. He had harnessed the power of high-pressure steam and created a truly monstrous locomotive. Yes, tonight, it's the night that you will watch Loco Profiling episode 17. London, Midland and Scottish, number 6399. Fury. Let us not waste any time. We need to cover this locomotive, Fowler's most outrageous concept, quickly. For time is something I do not have much of.
Ah yes, Locomotive 6399, Fury. Such a fitting name for a true beast of burden, based on the Royal Scots class 10-wheelers. Built in 1929 in the sacred halls of the North British Locomotive Company in Glasgow. She was actually a joint venture between the LMS and the Superheater Company. This was due to the fact that she utilized a German-designed Schmidt boiler with 3 chambers, each with a different boiler pressure. Speaking of boiler pressure, the only thing scarier than the typical monsters, doom and gloom associated with Halloween, and this locomotive being Fowler's take on Frankenstein's monster, is that a good chunk of this video must be wasted on a mathematics exercise, as no source ever mentioned this locomotive's tractive effort output. So, we can go to the tractive effort calculator on steamlocomotive.com, where we'll take the Royal Scots tractive effort for our obvious benchmark. Set the calculator to a 3-cylinder simple design, and then fill in the following variables: 250 psi of boiler pressure, 18 by 26 inch cylinders, so 18 inches in diameter with a 26 inch piston stroke, and 81 inch driving wheels. Together, this creates 33,150 pounds of tractive effort. But we only need 2/3 of that, 22,100 pounds, as Fury introduced a new bit of tractive effort related geometry. A brand new inside cylinder with a reduced diameter of 11.5 inches. So now you want to change the cylinder diameter from 18 to 11.5 inches. So the tractive effort is suddenly rated at 13,531 pounds. And you'll take 1/3 of that and round it off to a full number of 4,510 pounds. Because of course there is only one cylinder with that 11.5 inch diameter, compared to the 2 cylinders with the old 18 inch diameter. Now all that is left to do is put the two figures together to create an average, which will be Fury's actual tractive effort output. 22,100 plus 4,510 equals 26,610 pounds. Keep in mind, due to being a compound locomotive, or at least a semi-compound locomotive, greater pulling power was a lower priority compared to greater fuel efficiency. So now that we have the scary math exercise out of the way, how did this beast of burden actually function? The locomotive could boil water in the main section of the boiler at 250 psi, but the water was taken to an ultra-high pressure steam circuit at roughly 1600 psi, which I've put here as an average, as some sources went as low as 1400 and others as high as 1800. So 1600 psi on average. This steam circuit was filled with distilled water, which then went into another chamber at 900 psi. In fact, the inside cylinder got its steam from the high-pressure steam circuit, not from the main boiler. Instead, a mixture of fresh steam from the boiler and exhaust steam from the inside cylinder would be used to power the outside cylinders. But what motivated Fowler to try this tremendous ultra-high pressure steam experiment? Simple. The idea was to increase the thermal efficiency of steam in a bid to reduce the fuel consumption. The engine made a few short runs during January of 1930, but a longer test run from Glasgow to Carstairs was scheduled a little later that same year. It was on the day of that very run, February the 10th, that 6399 was approaching Carstairs station at slow speed. Suddenly, a tube in the ultra-high pressure circuit exploded, and the escaping steam ejected the coal fire through the firebox doors. Not only did this leave one of the crew members of the engine wounded, but it also resulted in the gruesome and rather ironic death of Mr. Lewis Schofield, who was a representative of the Superheater Company. Following this freak accident, the tube was taken to Sheffield University for studying and an investigation as to what went wrong, but no definitive conclusion was found. There was a similar incident with a French mountain-type locomotive that also had a Schmidt boiler would spawn an investigation of its own, which would conclude that inadequate water circulation in the ultra-high pressure circuit was responsible for both incidents. The boiler was eventually repaired, and Fury moved to Derby, where a number of running trials were carried out until early 1934, mostly revealing significant shortcomings in performance. The high-pressure boiler and semi-compound system may have had the good intention of decreasing the locomotive's fuel consumption. However, that is but a small part in the overall costs of running a steam locomotive. Because if the locomotive would spend more time in the roundhouse or the erecting shop for maintenance and repairs, rather than actually out on the railway, hauling trains and making money, that is no bloody good, now is it? As such, number 6399, Fury, was deemed to be a failure. Not a technological failure, mind you, but an economic failure, and it was only fitting that, in 1935, Fowler's successor, William Stanyard, would have the locomotive rebuilt with a new boiler. It even took on a new name and a road number, more firmly taking its debatable cult status as the unofficial 71st Royal Scots locomotive. Number 6170, British Legion. In fact, in this form, she has been argued to be the prototype of the rebuilt Royal Scots. During the rebuild, she even gained a new, bigger cylinder on the inside, with the original 18-inch diameter, which was standard for the other classes of 3-cylindered 10-wheelers of the LMS. The Royal Scots, the Patriots, and the Jubilees. After all, she didn't have the compounding system anymore, thus the smaller 11.5-inch diameter cylinder she had on the inside had no further use anymore. There were a couple of notable differences with the actual Royal Scots, however. For a start, 6170 had a newer cab, with dual side windows, compared to the slightly old-fashioned cutout cabs that the actual Royal Scots retained during their rebuild. And then of course her boiler was actually longer than those on the rebuilt Royal Scots, because ever since her construction back in 1929, the frame and chassis have been an elongated copy of that of the Royal Scots. But alas, none of that would be enough to have the engine spared for preservation. Regardless if you wish to remember her as a 6399 Fury or 6170 British Legion, the once monstrous locomotive eventually faced Judgment Day, when it was unceremoniously cut up for scrap, shortly after her retirement at some point in 1962.
So there you have it, the story of Fury. I hope all of you over there have enjoyed watching this episode as much as I have enjoyed making it. So, all that I have left to say is Happy Halloween. And to those who have, well, a gentleman's sausage, always remember the following thing for the following month. Yes, of course I'm talking about this tradition of No Nut November. My advice, don't participate in it. Because going for a wank at least once every day can keep testicular back pressure away. Or as a wise bat has once said,
not jerking off is cringe.
There you go. Good night.